Tami is working with AI for every day in her family farm in southern Illinois nearby St. Louis, Missouri. She was explaining how to make any suggestions for synthetic food with AI. Tommy told that AI don't get everyone to be happy. This is Backroads of Illinois for this week on WITY. Now back to you, Stu. This year is just starting with the AI revolution in the technology industry, and we saw it in Wall Street with semi-mini chip on the stocks, and every day in life. However, is there any concerns about demand for AI revolution in the agricultural industry? I am joining with Tommy Craig Schilling about AI. Hey, Tommy, how are you? And welcome back to the program.
Hello, it's great to be back with you and especially talking about one of my favorite topics.
Okay, Tommy, every day I see the full news about AI and even in the commercials. Tommy, how are we to be presenting to this technology to protect our business?
I Earlier this week I went to a visitation for a woman in our church who was in her mid 90s and had passed on. And I was standing near a couple farmers and we were talking about work I was involved in currently since leaving my 35-year career at Bayer. And I spoke about work that we were doing in agronomy and with an organization called Deep Root Strategies, which is the new consultancy we've formed together. And one of the things I mentioned was AI. And one of the farmers looked and smirked at me and said, "Well, I just can't wait for that." And in my mind, that sums up really what a lot of folks in agriculture are saying today in a bit of a sarcastic way, because in ag, as well as frankly, many industries, the role that AI will play is still a bit unknown. I had a chance to speak at a conference in November. I did three different sessions and a keynote, or two different sessions, workshops, and a keynote. And one of the things, even with, it was the Ag Gateway Conference with a lot of ag tech organizations, companies, industries, ag retail groups, some really talented people that introduced me to digital ag many years back. And even these leaders aren't really sure where AI is going to fit and how it's going to fit into the space. I liken it to the very beginnings of genetic traits, genetic modified traits, biotech traits, whatever you choose to call them, that we are just in the early days. And the most important thing is that we as an industry understand the kind of technology we're talking about. And basically, artificial intelligence in the past has been a technology that scientists used. Scientists back at Bayer, scientists in John Deere, scientists at Kasan AI, scientists with Headstorm. A lot of these companies have been using data scientists and to use AI technology, but not until generative AI did normal people like you and me be able to use AI in our daily work. And so I think in many ways, we've got to first understand how it can be used, how it can be used efficiently, and where it's going to bring the most benefit. And I use it every day because I have had a chance to work on it the last 3.5 years. But and my son uses it regularly, looking up different information on the farm, but my husband does not. He does not currently use it because he doesn't really see a value in it. And so I think that's the big hurdle we have to overcome is begin to align the use cases that of where this technology fits in for a farmer. And maybe it doesn't fit in for a farmer on a daily basis, But I think there are places that can be used, will be used, and it can be really advantageous. But we've got to get more people exposed to it. And one of the things we're looking at is doing some workshops or programs that could actually do that on a practical basis.
It's pretty tricky overall, but what is your main concern about this technology in the agricultural industry in the row crop space?
My biggest concern is I would say I have two. So the first is a concern that farmers, agri-tailers, and the folks closest to growing food don't get the opportunity or don't see the value in the technology. And I do get concerned over that because other industries are going to use this. It will drive efficiency in other places. And I like for ag to take advantage of that efficiency, but it also will open up new ways of doing things because if you can become more efficient in doing certain tasks or analysis, that then gives you time to do other things. The flip side is the other concern is that folks that are using AI are being transparent on how they're using it to come up with the information they're coming up with because we want farmers to trust what's happening and the information they're receiving, and we don't and we want to make sure as an industry we're being very open and trustworthy. And so I've been actively involved with the University of Illinois AgriBench effort. It's a consortium, actually. AgriBench, AI AgriBench is a consortium of companies including Microsoft, Bayer, John Deere, Tyrannus, Kasan AI, and there's one Extension Foundation, and we just added a couple more of. I've got to get into my brain, and it's about benchmarking for accuracy, specifically in agronomy. And I'm those. So those are the two concerns that I have.
We will be in the Jetsons, right?
Well, it's funny. Jetsons was my favorite cartoon when I was a kid, and I'm not sure we'll be hovering, but the information computer systems and dashboards they used were pretty cool, and we're pretty close to that today, even in the cab of a tractor. It's pretty high tech.
Right. How about the concerns on food technology and demand for synthetic food like fake meats? I heard about systemic food lot. What is your thoughts on the balance of synthetics and AI revolution?
It's an interesting area. If I break the question down, the first is my position on synthetics, and there are different ways to produce food today than we produced them 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And I think in many cases, what we're now doing in labs and in those environments, people would call synthetic, but in some ways it's just sped the process up. Now, some people are very uncomfortable with that. I choose to eat agriculture produced, farm produced food um, because I have the opportunity, I have the access, and I'm around it. Right, I live in the Midwest. We have our own beef in the freezer. We have good quality meat. We get our pork from a really good meat place just down the road, and we understand where our food comes from. But what we forget is there are people around the world who don't have access to good quality food at the volume they need for them and their families to be in a framework. And we allow the technology to be beneficial, but not let it run away and do things that are unintended. And so I do strongly believe in testing and trialing and publishing the results and having peer review. I believe absolutely in those things, just like we do in good evaluation today of different medicines that go on the market, different products in agriculture, inspections for meat. I see the use of AI as a tool in the process to produce food, but it still has to be regulated. Now, we want to manage so it's not overregulated or cost prohibitive, if it can be beneficial. Food still needs to be nutritious. Food still needs to have, you know, kind of a do no harm approach, that food that people are consuming isn't making them sick or isn't having a long lasting implication and doing something to their bodies. But I think it's doable. I think we've done it in other parts of history in food and ag. Um, and I think we'll do it again, but we have to keep our eye on that, not overregulate, but not let the technology go on its own without being managed.
You have some facts about database like a planting season and harvest progress using with AI.
I do. We've thought in work that I've done in the past, and in some of the work that I am engaged in as an advisor. Let me back up. I believe that technology best is best used to solve farmer problems. If we want to adopt a technology in agriculture, let's start with farmer problems first. And one of the challenges is for a farmer to take all the information they have and figure out, where do I plant a crop first, second, which field do I plant first, second, third, fourth? Typically, a farmer already has a plan for that, on where they're going to plant, when they're going to plant, and it's either based on the landlord preference, or it's based on the field conditions, maybe the soil type. Or I know in many situations I've talked to farmers that say they want to have a field, an early field close to home, so they can set their planter, set their combine, when they're just getting started. But those things are very those things could be optimized, I believe, by AI. If we could do some assessing of past weather, current weather situation, projected rainfall in a geography by field, as well as past yield and distance to, let's say, either, wherever the grain's going to get delivered. I believe there's a way that you could optimize those pieces of information using AI that wouldn't just be opinion. They would be they would be opinion and ground truth of what a farmer already knows, plus a little bit of data. I think we could find some interesting benefits. I do know this is one of the areas that farmers farmers have talked about, is help me on my logistics. Help me think through what the logistic benefits are of planting a field at a certain time versus a different field, and how that plays through. And same thing at harvest. Right now, the best way that a farmer knows whether a field of corn is ready to harvest is to go out, peel an ear, peel the husk off an ear, pull the ear off, um, get the grain off, put it in a moisture tester, test the moisture, and you know the answer. Or you can, a lot of farmers know you can take a kernel, bite it in two. You can look at black layer, but those are still very dependent on the farmer getting to every field. Well, that's not the easiest thing to do. So what if you could do some analysis where you literally would get an idea of what your harvest condition was, based on information that's available, but nobody really has the algorithm perfectly built. And it doesn't take into consideration things like landlord preference. My husband, for example, our son and my husband and son, as they farm, they take the landlord crop out first because they feel it is an honor to get to farm that property and they want to get it out and in the bin. Well, landlord property might be further away or closer to our farm, and so that doesn't work. It doesn't work just by geography. It's these other things that need to be accounted for. And I think AI can do it much easier than a human. We just have to figure out those kinds of things and figure out what the worth is, because I can't say that there are a lot of AI companies that are going to say, "Oh, I want to do this. I want to figure it out." I do know some are working on it. Some ag tech companies are working on this kind of thing, but I think it's going to be fun to see where these things fit. Again, once more farmers, ag retailers, grain dealers, financial institutions that do farm lending, once more people get their hands into these kinds of tools and start understanding them, I think then we're going to see a lot of just basic things get solved that we haven't been able to solve, or at least they're going to get better than we can do just as humans.
What is your final thoughts about the data center for AI in rural areas of expertise in central Illinois? Because we don't like that of the idea of data center for rural areas. What is your position on that?
Talk about a hard question, Caesar. This is a tough one, right? I was just listening to an NPR story yesterday, and it's around energy price increases and the problem with energy price increases at the same time because of these new data centers. Well, I'm a person that works in AI. I use AI. I live on a farm. I understand that I'm going to have to cover that piece of it, right? But I don't like it. I don't like it. But I'll step back and I think about cell phones. And I wasn't crazy about cell phone towers either being put in the middle of fields. Now, data centers are a whole lot different than a cell phone tower in a field. I will completely agree with that. And we don't fully understand how many data centers we need, where we need them. And I think that's a bit more of the debate that people need to see this information. I would tell you I'm not a big fan of solar panels on crop fields. I'd much rather see solar panels on parking garages and on roofs. I don't want it to go on a productive crop field. I don't even mind it being in a livestock pasture, but I think we have to be very protective of the resources, both the land and the water. That's a huge deal. And right now, I don't feel that there's a ton of transparency that's out there within people that are putting up data centers. I don't think they're having a lot of dialogue with the communities. I believe more dialogue with the neighbors, the farmers that are close. We've got to think about that.
Thanks again for your visit with us on today.
Well, you do an excellent job, Caesar, in challenging us to think differently. And I just really appreciate the things you bring up. I know you really forced me to think about some things. And I think the work that you're doing is really important for Illinois agriculture.
This is Tommy Craig Schilling on this podcast about the AI revolution on back roads of Illinois today.